in New York, the number of people who are actually paying taxes is a much smaller percentage than in Miami. He inherited this city that was this blue chip financial market, this cultural financial capital of the world. And the first thing he did was raise spending by $11 billion. Second thing he did was prove that he couldn't get the trash or the snow off the street during a storm. Third thing he did was very hard to find an appointee who somewhere in their dark history had not issued or written something anti-Semitic. And all he does is smile and try to be, he's basically, his message is, I'm not Lenin and Trotsky or Stalin. I'm the nice, happy face communist. And you're going to like me and you're going to like my communism. And we're all going to get along. And he's going to, I mean, if you're in New York, if you're in California, you got a choice. If you're in California and this billionaire tax passes, and you've got to come up with $50 million, you're going to flee. If you're in New York and they're going to raise your property tax on these multi-million dollar buildings, you're talking, could be 20 or 30 or 40, 50 million more a year, then you're going to flee. Get out. If you don't, they're just going to keep doing it. They're going to keep targeting you because they have an idea. I don't think people realize that. The socialist mind, I knew a lot of socialists in the universities and some friends of mine, and they always think that the whole core of socialism is I work hard and no one knows how I suffer at my job as a nurse, as a farmer, whatever. And I believe in the labor theory of value. Why is it that when Victor had a PhD, but he was pruning vines, and he was only making $4 an hour, I was, for 3 years. And then all of a sudden, 5 years later, he's an academic, and he's sitting in between classes and having coffee, and he's making $50 an hour. That's not fair. And then, so they don't think about supply and demand, expertise, nothing. And somebody would say, well, when Victor was pruning vines, a lot of people could not only prune them, they could probably prune them better. When he was teaching a particular Greek literature class and they thought that was an important class to offer, questionable, but that's what they said, very few people could do it. And they don't accept that. And so they run on this envy that we work hard and we get up and we do things, and therefore we should be compensated. And that's what a socialist is. And they're going to keep raising taxes. The other thing about it is when they raise taxes, they don't ever say thank you. Gavin Newsom, Nancy Pelosi, Diane, they're all wealthy, but they never said, we want to thank the people in California that are the 1% that are paying 50% of the income tax. And by the way, the 50% of the income tax in California, there's only about, I don't know what there is, 250 billionaires. They usually pay capital gains tax. They pay it about, 28%. The people in that 1% of Californians are highly compensated professionals and small business people who make $1 million or $2 million, $3 million, and then they get hit with a 13% tax rate, 0.3, plus their federal, plus Medicaid. So they're paying 55% of their income. And nobody ever says, thank you for doing that, you people. We have a very skilled elite that allow us to have this huge budget. They don't. And the attitude is always, they have to pay more. I remember in 1991, there was a fiscal crisis in California. And the state was broke. It's always broke. It always has a deficit. But this was a really bad deficit. So they decided to go after all state agencies, and one of them was the CSU, California State University system. So they laid off, and in the past, you always could lay off part-time lecturers, but then they got the idea, well, we exploit those people so well, we pay them so little, that by laying them off, we really reduce about 40% of our classes, which are big money earners, and they don't cost us anything. We exploit them, no benefit. But the ones that really are the high-priced assets, if you're going to go after budget cuts are the tenured full professor top step in fields that we feel are not essential. I disagreed with that. So they started laying off Russian professors, classics professors. I was on leave that year. Classics professors, dance professors, which was bad. It was really bad. But when you listen to them, and I knew them very well, they'd say, well, these people can pay. Why don't we tax anymore? Why don't we raise tax? I said, we already have the highest income tax. Well, they have a lot of money, or they wouldn't be able to pay what they do. But they never made the connection that their job was dependent on somebody being willing. So they had just contempt for the people that were already paying their salaries. And some of these classes had 3 and 4 people in them. But it was just outrage. It was never, why don't we cut our expenses and save the taxpayer? It was always, they owe us. And that's the attitude of the left. So you never know about California, but the main thing to keep in mind is 300,000 people of the upper middle class are leaving every year California. And it's getting to the point after 10 or 15 years, it's so noticeable. I don't know. I just think that we're a multiracial society, and if you still speak in tribal terms, we're getting to the point where it's not going to be sustainable. It's not. And everybody's got to back off. But what's happening is when we have more, if you look at the per capita income of blacks or any group, it's amazing progress.
This isn't about economics, not even politics. It's about a systematic dismantling of the lasting foundations that hold society together. And that's the real danger.
It really is. And if you talk about so-called white people and you look at per capita income, they're about 8 or 9 on some and 10 or 12 on others. And it's Arab Americans, it's people from India, number one, it's Chinese Americans. They're ahead of white people. How can that be possible in a white-dominated racist society? And that's what the biggest indicator of equality is, economic viability. And so and then when you look at certain other, if you look at PhDs that are granted in the humanities, they're about 60% women. If you look at the enrollments of elite colleges, they're about 55% female now. If you look at, you look at not just professional sports, but the post office, nobody really cares that African Americans are overrepresented. So it only applies to so-called white people when we say you're overrepresented or you're toxic or you did something. And then the final thing is it's a logical inconsistency when you have this country that the left damns and condemns as the product of white people whose toxic legacy still is the normative protocol. It's pretty clear that Barack Obama hated Donald Trump, that he was shocked when Donald Trump won, that he knew that Hillary had prompted because Brennan told him that Brennan said in writing that Hillary Clinton had prompted a false narrative to destroy Donald Trump. And that's what the intelligence, that came, I guess, from somebody talking about this Russian source. It's pretty clear to conclude that Barack Obama was president of the United States, and he ordered these intelligence heads to ignore what their agencies had found, i.e. nothing, and to pursue a narrative that he felt would destroy Donald Trump, of which he had no evidence for. And then he unleashed James Comey and John Brennan and James Clapper and Victoria Nuland and a whole bunch of other people. And then they spread this thing, Bruce and Nellie Orr and a whole bunch of them, James A. Baker, they all spread it. And that was by design.
George W. Bush leaves office after 2 terms with political tail between his legs, right? His numbers are low. He's turned the government back over essentially to the Democrat Party. And Barack Obama does the same thing. And George Bush goes quietly into the night.
Yeah, he went out like the gentleman he always was. He was a professional. I've met him a few times. People disagreed with a lot of things he did, but he had a professional code of conduct, and he didn't go from the sideline. Even though he didn't like Trump, he wasn't vocal about it. He said one time at the first inauguration, that was weird, S-H-I-T. You remember that?
Yeah.
When he heard the populist MAGA narrative. But he didn't do what the Never-Trumpers did. He didn't do what Mitt Romney did. Mitt Romney became a loudmouth Never-Trumper, and then for a brief tenure in his career, what was his name? It was Pancho or Rolando something. He had a kind of an Anthony Weiner fake name on social media. I'll remember.
Yeah.
They all like Hispanic names.
Carlos
Danger?
Yeah.
Is it Carlos Danger? Or
Yeah,
is that
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, he wanted Donald Trump's endorsement for that Utah seat. So he asked, and Trump gave it to him. And then as soon as he got it and got elected, he voted to convict Donald Trump. That was one of the themes I wrote in the first Trump book, The Case for Trump, that would you rather have somebody that was crass and crude and told the truth? And I'm not saying it's an either or, I know there's gradations, or would you like sober and judicious and eloquent and mellifluous Barack Obama lying and trying to destroy people's lives? And that's what he did. And the only thing that's different now, Jack, you get the impression that CNN, MSNBC, NBC, ABC, NPR, they don't have the same stature. Their megaphone isn't as loud as when Obama capitalized on them. And the people around Hillary and Obama, Jake Sullivan, Anthony Blinken, Ben Rhodes, they're all disgraced. So he's lost a lot of his stature. He's lost a lot of his subordinates. He's lost a lot of his outlets. It's just a wild west now on the internet. He can't control it. And so the idea that he's going to give an interview, to the New York Times, anybody cares, it doesn't matter. Barack, you're out there and you're going to sink or swim on what the truth is. It's all going to come out now. It's all going to come out. I don't think they're going to do anything to him because all they'll have to do is just have a New York or Washington, D.C. judge and jury and he'll get off. He could, do anything, but he's going to have to account for what he did. And that's going to silence him because the moment he opens his mouth, as he customarily does on social media every couple of days, people are going to say, if I were you, I wouldn't talk given what you're doing. People see James Comey, for example, he's always talking about how crude Donald Trump is, but he was the one that, as we said last time, arranged this, 86-47. And he's all of these spies. John Brennan said he was head of the conquistocracy, and he said he was a Russian operative. James Clapper accused him of being a traitor. These people are, just because they wear ties or just because they have letters after their name or they have fancy titles doesn't mean they're not scoundrels. They're all scoundrels. They weaponize the government. And you know how you know they weaponize the government? Because I'm serious, Jack, as I just did, if you Google weaponize and Barack Obama and government, it'll have Barack Obama warning about other people, i.e. Trump, weaponizing the government. That's what comes out because they project. I looked at part of it by the famous civil rights historian. And when he was in his prep school in Hawaii, he was kind of a mediocre 7th or 8th man on the team, but he was always demanding the coach let him in for more playing time. And he had an outsized, remember how he had that little meme when he was president that he was a great basketball and he was following the Final Four, and he and Reggie Love, the ex-basketball player, melded together somehow. And the point was that he really wanted to let us all know that he was a great athlete. But he was the same type of personality, always more outspoken than his abilities warranted.
We saw when he threw out the first pitch, I think it was a White Sox game, we saw what kind of an athlete he was. Hey, Victor,
compare that to George Bush's first pitch. He did very well.
He threw a strike. World Series.
Yeah,
beautiful.
Yeah. I didn't understand that. Peter Navarro and Steve Bannon went to jail when they were subpoenaed to Congress. Why didn't they just say, okay, I'll show up? And then every time they ask him anything, they'd say, I can't, under the Fifth Amendment, I can't testify. And I guess they had too much dignity, or they didn't want to give the impression that they were lying or hiding something, as these people did who went up and took the Fifth. Remember Eric Holder, when they asked him about Fast and Furious? He wouldn't produce documents. He wouldn't testify. They held him he wouldn't come even. They held him in contempt, just like Steve Bannon, and they did a referral like they did to Merrick Garland. There was always two rules. If you were a left-wing prominent person and Congress called you to testify, you just said, blank you, and nothing happened. If you were Bannon, who was a close advisor to the President of the United States, or Peter Navarro was one of his chief domestic advisors, and you called them, and they didn't show up, they put you in ankle cuffs and handcuffs, tried to humiliate you. So
Sandy Berger stole documents. He didn't
stuck him in his crotch, remember? Stuck him in his crotch. Yeah, he did.
Maybe both.
And all these people, again, there's two different scenarios here. There's the people who can be crude and loud and they're honest and they make no bones about their views, a Trump, a Bannon, a Peter Navarro. And then there's all of these sober and judicious, careful apparat, and Eric Holder, Merrick Garland, James Clapper, James Comey, John Brennan, Barack Obama, they're very carefully, and no, they're just scoundrels. They really are. And Eric Holder, Merrick Garland, James Clapper, James Comey, John Brennan, Barack Obama, they're very carefully, and no, they're just scoundrels. They really are. There's certain countries that are not attacked, at least. Sweden is vulnerable and Finland is vulnerable to Russian aggression, but they haven't been attacked, not Finland since 1939. And the reason is and the Swiss are never attacked. They're highly mobilized, and they have arms industry, and they have deterrence. The United States had not been attacked until I think I could make the argument that in the 90s we sort of let bin Laden think he could do whatever he wanted to the United States without retaliation. We let him go. We had many times a chance to get rid of him. We didn't under Clinton. And under Biden, of course, we lost deterrence. And after Afghanistan, we lost deterrence. But if you remember the Roman 5th century, late 4th century, 5th century, Vegetus's famous adage, si pacem para bellum. If you want peace, prepare for war. And if you have deterrence, you're not going to be attacked. And everybody said, well, you have to be perpetually armed? You got to spend all that money? Yes, you do. And that's what Ukraine's problem was. It didn't offer a deterrent to this huge country right next to it. And the Europeans didn't either. They were doing the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. They were disarming. They weren't meeting their 2%. They were giving, maybe insidiously and inadvertently, they were giving the message that Vladimir Putin was not an existential threat. We had the former German Gerhard Schröder, remember him? He was working for Gazprom. The whole Merkel foreign policy was corrupt and appeasing of Russia, or if not allied with Russia. So anyway, we had the red jacuzzi button in Geneva that Hillary pushed and said, reset. We're not going to be like George Bush, who was hard on the Russians after they invaded Georgia and Ossetia. We're going to be giving them lectures on human rights, and they're going to like us for that. That's what they thought.
Calls for constant readiness were met with complacency. Promises of security turned into gestures of appeasement, sending signals, intended or not, that there was no real threat. Leaders spoke of cooperation and mutual respect, convinced goodwill would ensure peace. It was a comforting illusion, one that shaped policies in both Europe and the United States, replacing deterrence with hope and firmness with symbolic gestures.
The Democrats have a new narrative, the left in general does, that they are saving democracy from Donald Trump. And that justifies almost any means necessary to achieve the end of destroying or preventing Donald Trump from governing effectively. The problem with all of this is they are destroying democracy to destroy Donald Trump. What do I mean? One of the issues that they are agitating is the redistricting of congressional districts in Texas, in California now. And the general problem the left has is if you look at gerrymandering to make these jigsaw puzzle piece-like districts, the left is way ahead of the right. In other words, states that have proportions of 30 to 40 to 50% for Donald Trump do not have that level of representation in the Congress. And there's been sophisticated studies of gerrymandering, and it boils down to the Republicans are short some 6 to 10 seats in the House based on the proportion of the national vote they have received. The Democrats know that, but they're angry about the Texas reapportionment and gerrymandering, and their attitude is, we've already gerrymandered our states to the maximum, don't dare try to emulate us. James Carville said that they have to get tougher. That's the new mantra. Got to get tougher, got to get meaner. Cory Booker screams and yells and throws a fit about every 3 weeks in the Senate. Hakeem Jeffries picks up his baseball bat. There's usually a video with the squad or representatives using the word shit or the F word, kind of pornographic. Jasmine Crockett periodically calls Donald Trump names that can't be repeated on air. But you can see the anger. And now the new idea is that they haven't been tough enough. They have been too tough. There's been 3 great scandals in the 21st century. The first was the Russian collusion hoax that was prompted by Hillary Clinton and facilitated by the Obama administration on its way out that just almost destroyed the Trump campaign, sabotaged his transition, and ate up 22 months of his first 2 years.